Greetings, everyone, and welcome to a short lesson that I like to call Email is More Than the Message. And today we're going to be talking about how we can do more with email than simply conduct business. Indeed, in today's society where we're constantly sending these messages back and forth, we don't always see people in person. These messages, these emails, become the foundation for helping us to build relationships and also foster goodwill concerning ourselves and the organization that we all represent. So first we'd like to take a look at a couple of examples of simple email format. The first example before you is what I would call a more formal kind of email format. This is the kind of format that I would use to send an email to somebody outside of M&D, somebody who's perhaps more important than I am, or possibly somebody that I just want to impress. As you can see from this particular example, I've utilized a very traditional letter writing format. I have a traditional greeting here at the beginning. I have a nice paragraph structure here in the middle, and of course a nice formal closing here at the end. Now I know it can take some time and effort to put an email into this format to make it look this way, but it's really that time and effort which are the most important thing. That time and effort shows how much you care about your message, and it also shows how much you care about the person who's going to receive it. You put the time in to make sure that your message is crafted well, that it's easy to read, easy to understand, easy to digest, and that you really care about what you're doing. That's the kind of thing. Care about what you're doing, care about the people that you're doing it with, that really engenders you to people. It makes them like you. Yeah? And so that's why we go through these processes. That's why we do it. To make people like you. Secondly, you'll notice this basic structure over here. And every email is going to be composed of these three elements. We have a salutation opening here at the beginning. We have a body in the middle where we take care of our business. And finally, a salutation closing at the end. In this particular example, you can see again, I have a fairly traditional opening greeting. But then I transition to this first paragraph where I take care of that "how are you doing" kind of thing. Mention the weather, mention a recent holiday, hope you're doing well, all those kinds of things. Here at the end, I'm looking towards the future. It's great talking to you. I hope to talk to you again soon. I hope this thing coming forward goes well. All of those kinds of things, right? And you can see that in this example, I've actually devoted almost twice the amount of writing to those salutation sections as I have to the body. And I'm not saying that every email needs to have twice the salutation as it does to have body. This is not a hard and fast rule, but rather that those salutations are just as critical as the message you are trying to convey. Our second example is a more informal example of an email. And this is what I would call an internal email. These are the kinds of emails that I send to the people here in this office, and you may have received an email just like this from me, right? You can see that because we're dealing with people that we know, that we work with every day, I don't have to devote nearly as much time to those salutations, and yet I still go through the process of putting them in there, right? A nice greeting, right? A nice paragraph structure in my body, and finally a nice formal closing at the end, right? And because I work with you folks every day, because you know me, I know you, I obviously don't have to go through as much work to build and maintain those relationships. But I'm still going through just enough to show people how much I respect them, how much I care about them, and how much I care about the message that I'm conveying, right? And so when you think about that spectrum between those two examples, in this one, very informal, very quick, terse, the previous one, much more formal, much longer, you can see this kind of spectrum of formality, right? And every email might fit somewhere within that spectrum from being more formal to less formal, and yet we still see that every email contains these three basic elements: our salutation opening, our body where our message is conveyed, and finally our salutation closing. So in order to start developing some of these practices in your own email writing, I think it's important that we adopt some basic philosophies. First, we need to think of email like stepping into someone's office. I mean, seriously, how often do you step into someone's office and not ask them how they're doing? Secondly, regardless of whether this is an email and going over the wires or whatnot. This is communication between human beings, and it is very similar, like you're just standing right in front of them, right? And so we want to show that care and show that respect for the recipient of this message through our writing, the same way that we would show them that respect and care if we were standing in front of them. Unlike standing in front of somebody and having a conversation, however, writing gives you the opportunity to craft a perfect message. You should take the time to try to craft that perfect message. No message is perfect, but try to make it as perfect as you can. Put the time and effort into making that message perfect. Because a lack of care in that message is often interpreted as a sign of disrespect. Finally, we need to acknowledge the simple fact that no two emails are ever exactly alike. And as such, we need to treat every email we write as though it's a new adventure and we're essentially starting from scratch. In order to help guide our writing and determine what we're going to write and how we're going to write it, I want you guys to keep these 4 principles always in mind. Our writing should always reflect our dedication to truth and sincerity. It should always reflect basic human decency and respect for the person who's receiving it. Our writing should always reflect the nature of our relationship with the recipient. And finally, we should always take into account the impact that our message is going to have on the person who gets it. Using those 4 principles, we can begin to determine how we need to present things and what specifically we need to write. And finally, I want to leave you with the basic rule that it's always better to err on the side of being too formal than ending up not formal enough. All right? You're never going to get in trouble for being too formal in an email. So, that pretty much wraps up our lesson for today. And I hope that it's been helpful for everyone, and that everyone has found at least a couple of little tidbits to help them to write better emails and to use them to do more than just conduct business.